If you scroll through the monthly Spotify listeners for the biggest stars of the 1980s, you can see that these musicians still have a massive impact on the culture, with one notable exception, Prince. Prince, who many people would consider to be possibly the biggest star of the 1980s, lags notably behind many of his contemporaries. Well, in this video, I'm going to go over the 3 things that explains why Generation Z is not interested in Prince. Number 1, controversy falling flat. So if you actually ask anyone who's around in the 1980s why Prince was such a big figure, one of the things that will consistently come up is that Prince was always stirring the pot. He was a perpetual line stepper, much like Rick James. And just like now, one of the surefire ways to get eyes on your content was to be a polarizing figure. It was to cause controversy, and that would get people to be interested in your music. And while today seemingly we've pushed most of our controversy hogs into the political sphere, back in the 1980s particularly, it was kind of needed for you to be some way controversial for you to break through. And Prince was the expert at this. It can be argued that Prince may just be the single most controversial musician of all time. And the reason why music is nowhere near as controversial now is because Prince just did everything. It should be remembered that Prince is the reason why we have the parental warning stickers on albums. At some point in the 1980s, Tipper Gore, who was Al Gore's wife, caught her daughter listening to Darling Nikki. And she had such a, think of the children breakout moment that her and the wives of a few other Washington bigwigs got together and founded the Parents Music Resource Center, which was there to pressure the RIAA into putting those stickers on albums that they deemed offensive. You got any dirty words on that album? You gotta put a sticker on there that says so. It's the law. And as part of this moral crusade, they created a list of 15 songs. The Filthy 15, as they were called, that were just to show just how depraved music could get in the 1980s. And do you want to know who wrote the top 2 songs on that list? During this period, Prince may have actually just been like the most hated man in America by the parents of America. My mom told me that like my grandfather would regularly just call Prince the devil, like Satan, because he's obviously just that evil. And I mean, it wasn't for nothing. I mean, Darling Nikki is still a bit raunchy, you could say, even by today's standards. Prince would consistently sing about like taboo subjects in like courtroom detail. And he was also going to be doing this dressed in this extremely experimental androgynous style, mixing both white and black music and mixing in religious themes into this soup. So you can see all of these things featured in the classic I Would Die For You. I'm not a woman, I'm not a man. I am something that you will never understand. I'll never beat you. I'll never lie. And if you're evil, I'll forgive you by and by, because I would die for you. That is definitely not up to Southern Baptist doctrine levels. I'll just say that much. And it also should be remembered that on top of all of that, Prince was one of the very first black superstars, like ever. So you have the racial tensions on top of this. And those are just the main things. I mean, Prince was always getting into trouble. I mean, at some point, he just changed his name to a literally unpronounceable symbol for years. And people just had to call him the artist previously known as Prince because there was literally no way to say the name. Now, this was all excellent for promoting his music at the time. He was constantly in the headlines, which promoted his music. It made it anti-authority, and it made it cool to listen to Prince for so many reasons. But the thing about controversy is, once it has been done and it becomes accepted by the wider culture, it loses its edge. And whenever you have Prince, who was so successful and who had such a pillar stone of his career being controversy, now there's just a lot of wind that has been sucked out of that sail. And if you have grown up in a world where the things that Prince did that were so revolutionary are just the way that it's always been, as far as you can tell, it doesn't make as big of an impact for some people if you are of that younger generation. But these social issues were not the only type of controversy that Prince dabbled in, which brings up my second point. Number 2, confusing discography. So Prince released about like 40 billion albums, and that may actually be a little bit intimidating for new fans to get into. So one of the issues that Prince had during the 90s is that he thought that Warner Music, his label, was not releasing his albums quick enough to the Prince standards. That's just how fast the man worked. He was literally making music faster than they could sell it. So anyways, they had this album issue and Prince got mad, so he started writing Slave on his cheek and having all these tiffs in the media, and then he, changed his name to the aforementioned unpronounceable symbol. Now, regardless whether or not you think that Prince was in the right for his actions during this period, the fact remains that after 1995, Prince's singles, for whatever reason, be it corporate meddling on the record label's part, complete confusion on the public's part, or just a lack of creative control and desire on Prince's part, Prince just disappeared essentially from radio after 1995. 1995 being the year that Gen Z starts. So you have this entire generation who's growing up in a period where Prince is consistently, still making music, but none of it's on the radio. You're never seeing any music videos, which we'll get to in a minute. And it's this incredibly confusing situation if you do want to get into them, because it's like, which of these 40 albums should I listen to? And if you do hear anything, it's only from this specific period in the 80s. So it creates this situation where it's just kind of hard to get into Prince. And I would like to juxtapose that with the other big star of the 80s, Michael Jackson, who had this very neat and orderly, concise set of albums that were all good. Everything made sense. He was still getting, single play up to the very end. And because Prince is, by virtue, a album artist, I mean, you miss out on so many details if you were just listening to those hit singles from the 80s, because unlike kind of Madonna, there's just so much more going on in those albums than just the hits. And further complicating this issue was access to these albums, which brings up my third point. Number 3, Prince versus the internet. So Prince had a true love-hate relationship with the old information superhighway. He was actually one of the very first musicians to put their music online, and that started in 1998 whenever he started selling the Crystal Ball box set in direct order version online on a website. Also in February 2001, he opened up NPG Music Club, which was a monthly online subscription service which would give you access to exclusive content such as his album Expectation. And it should be noted that this precedes artists even like Radiohead offering their music directly to fans. However, despite Prince's so far, early adoption of the internet, 2007 seemed to be the period where he had a true heel turn in his opinion of the service. Because after this point, Prince just turns into absolute hater mode. At some point in 2007, there was a woman who uploaded a shaky homemade video of her baby running around to Let's Go Crazy, and Prince sued her, big time. And this lawsuit would stretch on 4 years. Also later that year, Prince went about removing essentially all of his music from all of the internet. Prince would essentially spend the next couple years going back and forth in this bipolar way of sometimes his music's on Spotify, sometimes none of it is, sometimes he'll release a song on YouTube, sometimes he'll take everything off, sometimes he's releasing more albums on newspaper sites. It was just kind of a weird period for him. However, Prince's relationship with the internet probably hit its true low point in 2014 when he sued 22 citizens, just complete normal people, for $22 million because he thought that they had shared bootleg copies of his concerts online. And it's in these moments that Prince lost so much respect from people on the internet, because it's not just I have issues with the companies or whatever. It's suing actual individual private citizens for, enjoying your work on some level. And I feel that Prince just on some deep level just conceptually never really understood a lot of what the internet is, and that severely hurt his popularity, with the internet age. I remember for the longest time, if you searched up Prince music on YouTube, didn't matter what the song, the only thing that would come up is this freaking performance of Adam Levine singing Purple Rain to Howard Stern. That was it. That was the first time that I heard Purple Rain, because I literally had no other way to hear it. In 2015, a federal appeals court did side with the owner of the Dancing Baby video, saying that this was in fact fair use because, oh my god, why are you suing a baby, Prince? But it all just really makes me wonder, is this some kind of like Freudian slip, with Al Gore? Because like Al Gore, invented the internet, and Tipper Gore had all these issues with Prince back in the day. Does it all just come back to Al? Is it just like latent Gore hatred? But Sloydian frips aside, all of this changed on April 21st, 2016, when Prince unfortunately passed. I remember immediately afterwards, there were all of these like bootleg videos that went up on YouTube and that were constantly getting taken down by the estate because, Prince didn't want any music up, but it was really hard to like mourn him online because, there wasn't any actual links to anything official. As the years have went on, Prince's estate has taken more control over the music placement, and now his songs and music videos are able to be accessed online, which is good. And it makes me wonder if there will be some kind of like renaissance and appreciation for Prince from the next generation, whatever we're calling them, because they actually have access to Prince in a much easier format and can understand why he was so revolutionary. And it may end up with this weird situation where there's just this lack of appreciation of Prince before and after Gen Z because of this weird finagling with the internet. It truly does make one wonder, just like this video.